Good morning. I'm Dr. Bonnie Burns-Whitmore from Cal Poly Pomona. I'm a professor here, and I'm happy to introduce Peng, and he is a postdoctor researcher at the University of California, Davis, and he's going to be joining Kansas State University as an assistant professor. His area of expertise is in carbohydrate extraction, characterization, and quantification. His research then expands multiple areas of research and health promoting potentials of plant-based diets. He earns his PhD in food science at the Memorial University at Newfoundland in Canada, where he worked in enzymatic synthesis. And we would like to provide a very warm welcome to Dr. Peng, and please give him a hand here. Thank you.
Well, thank you for Ms. Whitmore for nice introductions. I'm Peng, and from UC Davis. And first of all, and thanks everyone for being here. And for sure, good morning. And I'm here presenting the studies on behalf of Dr. Daniela Barretis, who is unable to come and join us due to the health-related issues. But she sends her sincere apologies and appreciation for your understandings. And well, I'm very happy to present it and answer any related questions. Well, our research title is such a long, so let it simplify for you. We are the carbohydrate chemistries. So we are trying to comprehensively profile the carbohydrate compounds and related prebiotic effects in different plant-based beverages. And the four beverage material we use to compare is oat, soy, coconut, and almond beverages. This research is conducted collaboratively between UC Davis and the University of Wisconsin Madison, and one of our team member, Yuping Huang, who just recently joined the National University of Taiwan. And well, she's very helpful. So, and before we introduce any fundamental research, we want to state that we have no any conflict interest between any products or companies with us. Okay, so we will mention some companies' name, we will mention some products, and even so, you have some brands. These are overviews for all audience to understand the overall structures of these presentations. First of all is introductions, and for the fundamental research, they separate into two parts. The first part is the oligosaccharides characterization and activity evaluations. And the second part is the polysaccharides characterization and evaluation. So let's start from the introductions. As mentioned in these symposiums, the industries of plant-based beverage is really booming. Not only the beverage, but anything plant-based. And three top factors decide the customers to choose plant-based beverage is health and nutrition, and then sustainability, and also the diversity of products. So for the nutrition and health factors, the plant-based materials, including beverage, offer a lower fat, no cholesterol, and no lactose, right, compared to dairy milk. So that is very friendly for lactose intolerable groups. And the consumers right now are paying more attention to the environmental concerns, and it demands a lower carbon footprints, and the plant-based material usually is the best option. And plant-based beverage can be made from different plants or materials, including nuts, greens, and legumes, and even some vegetables. So, and even our hardcore dairy lovers may find some interesting taste and products they love in the plant-based category. And if we search the plant-based literatures in the Google Scholar, you find plenty of literatures. And right now, research is quite limited to the production, processing, and even so, also the nutritional compositions, the brief nutritional compositions, and the anti-nutritional factors of the plant-based beverage. So it stimulates certain concerns, and also it gives some light on the nutritional benefits of them. And in the plant-based food, including beverage, there are, always have three major nutrition compositions. First one is for sure carbohydrates or fiber, and then followed by lipids, protein, and some minor composition, including phytochemicals, minerals, and organic acid, etc. And these compositions have been well utilized by different industries, but for carbohydrates, it can be used for food, for the pharmaceuticals, for the cosmetics, and for nutraceuticals, and with different bioactive properties. But as a food scientist, as a carbohydrate chemist, I want to correlate these carbohydrates with, closely with their prebiotic effects. So we mentioned the prebiotics and we mentioned carbohydrates. What's the connection between them? The mainstream prebiotics are considered as indigestible carbohydrate, and especially indigestible oligosaccharides. And then what's the oligosaccharides? Oligosaccharides is a sugar chains contain sugar monosaccharides range around 3 to 20 units. Right? So lists have several cartoons here showing here. Different colors represent different shape, and different color represent different type of monosaccharides. And the angles of the linkage represent different linkage styles. So it needs a specific enzyme to digest it and break down into monosaccharides as a carbon source. And for infant formula, for the human milk oligosaccharides usually considered the gold standards as a prebiotic in terms of their selectivities. But the dairy oligosaccharides can be found in all kinds of dairy products, but they are really low in bovine milk, right? They are around very good amounts in human milk, and so that's Professor, there's a question asked if there's any good alternatives for the human milk for the breastfeedings. There may be an answer, but always the human milk is the best for the infant so far. And the scientists right now, we are trying to find the alternatives. And the scientists so far, some scientists and manufacturers start to purify and enrich the bovine milk oligosaccharides from bovine milk and add it back to the bovine milk-based infant formula to mimic the gut health of human milk. And as adults, is maybe not the best options to get these gut health benefits from the human milk or from the infant formulas, fortified infant formulas. And then what's the next step? So researchers start turning their attention to the plant-based oligosaccharides. There are two most common plant-based oligosaccharides. One is raffinose families, one is the fructose oligosaccharides families, including inulins. All these type of groups share a similar sucrose core. So sucrose core is here. Disaccharides. And then for raffinose families, the glycoside, which is a yellow circle, starts to grow from the glucosides of the sucrose core. And for the fructose oligosaccharides, it starts to grow from the fructosides of that sucrose core. So it gets a fructose oligosaccharide chain. And if you compare the oligosaccharides structures with between the plant-based and dairy-based, you will see the diversity of the linkage and the monosaccharides is very different. The plant-based oligosaccharides usually is less selective. So we will recommend if the manufacturers want to enrich these plant-based oligosaccharides, utilize them to mimic the gut health of the human milk, create mixtures, right? Taking the oligosaccharides from different plant materials to create a mixture with more diverse structures so that they can stimulate different probiotic strains in the gut with more efficient rates. And then that's a trend right now is whether the manufacturers can create a hybrid milk products, which is mixtures of dairies and plant-based beverage, and whether these hybrid products can get benefits from both sides. The plant-based beverage contains a very good number of oligosaccharides. But dairy milk also has an excellent quality of protein. And hybrid products is probably could be a new trend. And just the last week before we have these symposiums, we get a news popped up from Netherlands. And these fundings is collaborated by different stakeholders, including the farmers, startups, and the food companies. And it gets 1 million in the 4 years straight. And research is very focused on modeling hybrid products of this dairy beverage. And it targets to create these hybrid products with more advanced processing technologies, with different economic models. But again, it's a lack of some insights in terms of their chemistry compositions, especially for their carbohydrate compositions. Right, but it's very enlightening. And Netherlands is always the leaders in the dairy products, even so in the plant-based beverage area. And there are already some companies start to do their commercialization experiments in these hybrid products. This company called DFA is an American company. They developed the dairy plus hybrid products based on 50% of dairy boiled milk and 50% of plant-based milk. And there's another company in Netherlands. It's called Ware. And it created a beverage based on 60% of boiled milk proteins and 40% of plant-based proteins. And it marketed as a milk with plant ingredients. It's very interesting. So whether these hybrid milk products will be the next superstars in the beverage market, we don't know. Yeah, let's see in the future decades. Okay, let's start with some fundamental research. First section is the oligosaccharides. Oligosaccharizations, recoveries, and the prebiotic evaluation. There are two versions in current plant-based beverage. One is sweetened, one is unsweetened. And our target is to investigate the prebiotic activities in all these 4 plant-based beverages so that we want to avoid any artificially added carbohydrate source, especially the sucrose and glucose, which is used as a sweeteners in the beverages. And therefore, we determined that we're going to use unsweetened one and correlated the realistic commercial products with our the health effects of our daily diets. And it's more difficult to characterize the protein, more difficult to characterize the carbohydrate compared to the proteins. So proteins has a relatively linear chains mainly consists of 21 amino acids. And compared to the proteins, carbohydrates also have a very diverse group of monosaccharides. As you can see here in the table, there are different colors of monosaccharides, different shape, different color represent different monosaccharides. Okay, very diverse. And this is just a screenshot of the table. Actually, that's more than that. And also, in terms of structures, proteins were linear, and oligosaccharides or polysaccharides, which is the larger carbohydrates, usually has a very branch structures. So in these monosaccharides, just an example, any monosaccharide structures has at least 3 to 5 hydroxy group, which can connect with their neighbor monosaccharides. So that in a polysaccharide chain, you can see multiple branches, right, instead of linear structures. And then with these complex branch structures, along with the diverse monosaccharide composition, it leads to many isomers, which has no clear nomenclatures in international societies. And it's very troublesome for people to recognize and name them. And most important is compared to the proteomics that use the trypsins to specifically create the protein segments and then characterize them through this bottom-up proteomics. Carbohydrates has no uniform methods, techniques, or enzymes that can specifically create the segments of carbohydrates. So that's the bottom-up glycomics usually have to rely on the chemical degradations to create the random segments of carbohydrates. Okay, so the conclusion is that there's no single analytical technique that can analyze the structures of carbohydrate, and usually multiple one has to be employed. Well, there's many techniques to separate and also to ionize, to detect carbohydrates, right? For separation techniques, you can such as ion exchange chromatographies, hydrophilic interaction chromatographies, and in our research, we use PGC, the porous graphic carbon chromatographies, and then coupled with the Q12 mass spectral detectors. And before we inject our samples into the mass spectros, we need to purify it extensively because the LC system is intolerable to the larger polymers. Okay, we have to remove the polysaccharides and the proteins, and then enrich the oligosaccharides at the first stage, and then let it pass through the carbon-18 stationary materials. These carbon-18 stationary materials can remove and bound the hydrophobic compounds, including peptides, including some phytochemicals, and also lipids. And then after injection, the samples, we can see on the LC mass, there's a very clear separations of different oligosaccharides in the PGC chromatographies. Every peak represents individual oligosaccharide structures. And this data have been simplified into a table on your right side. This table have two key information. The first column is a code. You see 5 digits code, right? For example, the first one is 4000. What does this mean? Each code representing the amounts of the monosaccharides in these oligosaccharides chains. For example, the 4 corresponding to the amounts means the 4 hexos in these oligosaccharide structures. And then 0 means there's no acetyl hexos. The third 0 means there's no deoxyhexose. The fourth 0, this means there's no pentose, and then there's no hexouronic acids. Okay, so this 400 means is the oligosaccharides called 4 hexose. And then another information important is that the second column, it represents the peak areas or the relative abundance or the quantity of these specific structures exist in our sample. Okay, and I don't expect you to look into all the digits in there. This is a long number, but the color bar represents the number, the values of that peak areas. So the longer this red bar is, the more abundant or more concentrated of this structure is in our samples. From the top to the bottom is gradually decrease of their relative abundance. And so that the highest abundance of the oligosaccharides is 4 hexose. And this example was coconut milk, okay? And then let's extend the coconut milk to all the beverage samples. Okay, we have almonds, we have oat, we have coconut, and soys. Every type of sample have a biological duplicate that then to show you that how the variables of the sample could be. Similarly, same colors compare within the same colors. Okay, and just to make this table more clear, several key information you can look into it. The third row called total primary structures. Okay, is a total primary structure means that how many sugar code, right, representing different oligosaccharide structures is in this table, in these samples. For almonds, there's around 25 to 30 oligostructures. And for oat, there's around 41 to 48. For coconut, there's around 60 to 80. And for soybean, it's around 30. And another key information is the last row, sorry. It's called sum. So the full name is summaries of the peak areas. So we actually add on all the values in the column, okay, to the bottom. So that all the summary of the peak areas can compare horizontally among different samples. The most abundant one apparently is the oat, right? That has a longest color bar, and then followed by the coconut, soy, and then almond. So this table is the summaries of the also Q12 results, but it only gives carbohydrates that has a degree of polymerizations around 3 to 20. Okay, so it contains monosaccharides around 3 to 20 of them, and the soybean milk represents the happy mediums between abundance and diversity. Yeah, it's not highest, but it's a medium, standing in the middle. Yeah. And then we want to roughly evaluate, investigate which type of oligosaccharides is in these 4 beverages. And the top one is a soybean. Actually, it's the raffinose family you see here. 3 raffinose family representatives that we have in the commercial standard markets. Stachylose, raffinose, and robascose. In the soy, there's a good number of them, right? So it's verified our hypothesis that the raffinose family is the most common one that can found in the plant-based source. But in almond, coconut, and oat beverage, that's almost nothing. Trace amount. What are them? Well, we can maybe get some information from the second sections of the studies. But before that, we need to investigate the prebiotics of these fractions. Okay, we call it oligosaccharides, enriched oligosaccharides fractions. And to test their prebiotics, we need to remove all the simple sugar from all these oligosaccharides enriched fractions. Why? Because the simple sugars can stimulate any growth of any microbial-organisms, especially glucose. They are very friendly for us, any of us. And PGC is stationary material used to retain the oligosaccharides and remove all simple sugars. Here is primary investigations. We compare recovery rate of the simple sugar, which is in the red squares, and the oligosaccharides oligosaccharides carbohydrate in this green square. Simple sugars are glucose, sucrose, and maltose. Okay, and the raffinose families was given. So this sample we use to test is soybean milk, and in the last column you can see the recovery rate. For simple sugar is almost close to zeros, and for the raffinose families is close to 100%. Very good recovery rate. So that using this method, we can enrich most of the oligosaccharides in the soybean milk and remove most of the simple sugars. And here we come. The prebiotic evaluation shows us that, well, the blue curve is boiled milk oligosaccharides, and orange color is soybean milk oligosaccharides. And then the first one is the light gray color is the glucose. So remember, glucose can stimulate growth of any bacteria, and then boiled milk can selectively stimulate only the good bacteria to grow. And then soybean milk oligosaccharides can shows that equal efficiencies in terms of growth effects in majority of the probiotic strains, including the bifidobacterial adolescentes, and animalis, and the infantis, and the longums. But one exception is the bifidobacterials of bifidum, right? It didn't stimulate growth at all. So it's kind of interesting in selectivity as well. It helps certain bacterial strains and didn't bother with another one. But this is not, we know that this is not the full spectrum of the carbohydrate compositions in our plant-based beverage. What about the polysaccharides, and what's their size, and what's their activity? Well, there is a second part of our research about polysaccharides. In terms of polysaccharides, we similarly use the unsweetened plant-based beverage, or soybean milk, coconut, and almond, and oat. And we want to explore all the classes, all the categories of carbohydrate, no matter smaller one or larger ones. And then so that we collaborate with the University of Wisconsin and borrow this instrument, membrane filtration instruments from Dr. Grustan Ostak's lab. And this instrument can help us separate the carbohydrates into different molecular size. Okay, we change the membranes accordingly with the expected molecular size. So the first membrane filtration membrane we use is a 0.2 micrometer microfiltration, this type of membrane. And then after that, we change it to 10 kD ultrafiltration membrane, and then is 3 kD ultrafiltration membrane. Each step, it allows compounds, smaller compounds pass through it, and large compounds stay in the retentate. So every filtration separates the samples into retentate and permeate, and each step will filter out certain compounds. So microfiltrations will filter out the fats. Okay, and the ultrafiltration, 10 kD ultrafiltration will filter a certain good majority of the proteins and some of the polysaccharides. And 3 kD ultrafiltration will filter the 3 kD, the majorities of polysaccharides. And in the 3 kD permeate, only the oligosaccharides and the simple sugar will stay. And then instead of using LC-Q12 mass spectros, as we know that polymers will collocate, and we want to test the polymers, what we can do? Using this matrix assisted laser desorption ionization time of flight mass spectral techniques, okay, or we abbreviate it as a MALDI-TOF. These mass spectra do not need filtrations, doesn't need any mobile phase or needle injectors, so there's no clocking going to happen. What we need to do is to dry the sample, mix it with the matrix, dry the sample on the sample plates, and activate it by the MALDI-TOF lasers. And then the sample will get ionized, vaporized in the vacuum chamber in the top chimneys. And they fly in the vacuums and then eventually reach to the ion detectors, right? So this technique is perfect for the polysaccharides applications and identify the compounds with molecular weight up to 40 kilodalton. And before we do a MALDI-TOF, we roughly evaluate what's the carbohydrate composition content levels in different beverage. There's three pairs of filtration fractions, and then 4 types of different samples. Among the 4 beverage samples, the oat and soy apparently show much higher carbohydrate content compared to the rest of them. And the soy is really, really high, and we want to know it. We are more curious about what's composition then, right? And due to time limits, we just focus on this oat and soy composition. And then here is the profiling of MALDI-TOF. Sorry, that's probably my phone's alarms. If you can help me to close it, yeah, tell me your phone. Thank you. Yeah. In the little squares, this is the raw data of MALDI-TOF. It's so complicated and so too informative, so we have to separate in 2 parts and tell you some more details. So let's zoom in the lower range of 300 Dalton to 4K Dalton, okay, and enlarge here. The upper one is the oat permeate or 3 kD filtration, and the oat retentate or 3 kD filtrations. And you can see in the oat permeate, there's a very regular patterns of the oligosaccharides peak, right? And then in the oat permeate, there's almost no oligosaccharides peaks in it. But there's a huge ramp next to the 3 kD Daltons, which is around 3.5 to 4 kD. And this peak is a carbohydrate, it's a polysaccharides with a DP, the degree of polymerization is around 22 to 24. And then let's zoom in the higher mass range of these samples. And then in the 5 to 40 kD mass range, in the oat permeate, there's almost nothing, right? There's no peak, very smooth. It shows that the 3 kD filtrations in instruments perfectly separate the larger polysaccharides and the lower oligosaccharides. And in the retentate, there's again a very regular patterns of polysaccharides with a DP gap around 20 to 24 hexoses. Very interesting, and it's from oat. And also in almonds, in coconut, in soybean beverage, you also can find this polysaccharide peak abundantly appears, okay, in the MALDI-TOF instruments. And it's very interesting, and it stimulates us to think about what's their property and health benefits. And then the question is that, can polysaccharides also be the prebiotics? Well, it's a question still, but it can be true. The polysaccharides, polysaccharides can separate into, categorize into soluble and insoluble polysaccharides. For the soluble polysaccharides, for sure, in beverage, they have to be soluble. And soluble polysaccharides, 2 groups. One is pectins. Pectin has a backbones consist of galactogenic acids and the raminos, okay? This yellow, white squares, and then this raminos. And then second group is hemicellulose. Hemicellulose is much more diverse. The backbone can consist of glucose mainly, or mannose only, or cellulose only. And we need different enzymes to cleave it into the individual free monosaccharides as a carbon source for bacteria. And to be a bit simplified, what is digestible or indigestible polysaccharides? Well, any polysaccharides want to show their prebiotic fats, they have to be indigestible. Otherwise, they get digested and absorbed in the upper intestinal tract, right? They become all blood sugar. And to be digestible, we have in the human gut, we only have one type of polysaccharides indigestible, which is starch. Right, consists of many glucose and linked by the alpha-1,6 or alpha-1,4 linkage. And the simple answer is that if the polysaccharides consist any monosaccharides other than glucose, they have a high potential to be indigestible. Okay, they can be the prebiotic polysaccharides. So that the knowledge of monosaccharides compositions or monosaccharides building blocks in the polysaccharides is very important in terms of their prebiotic fats. However, the Q12 mass, the tandem mass results of Q12 techniques cannot tell us what's the exact monosaccharides in it. The Q12 results can generate different potassium ion. For example, the hexose have a potassium ion of 162 daltons, right? This type of molecular weight implies that it can be glucose, galactose, mannose, and fructose. But what exact monosaccharides could be? We don't know. So that we have to hydrolyze them and analyze them one by one. The solution for us is that we analyze them by the QQ mass spectros. Well, to analyze the native monosaccharides on QQ mass spectra, we have to rely on stable helix chromatographies with high concentration of samples, along with a microfluidic system. It's complicated, expensive, and otherwise, more affordable ways to find the suitable derivation methods. But this method has some disadvantage. It costs extra labors, time, and money. And sometimes it's difficult to find the most suitable methods before you become a real carbohydrate chemist. Well, but if you found it, you can utilize it in the carbon-18 column with perfect peak separations, and it's also compatible with HPLC UV system, and so that you don't need to rely on mass spectra, which is super expensive for some lab setup. And this is brief workflows. We hydrolyze the polysaccharides and then derivatize it and analyze by QQ. This is the brief mechanisms how these sterilization agents function on the monosaccharides. So two PMP PMP agents connect with one monosaccharides and form a PMP labeled monosaccharides and perfectly separating carbon-18 materials. And these methods, if you want to look into these method details, we can check our recent paper, and this method help us to analyze the pomegranate side streams and published in the food chemistry. And then we got the monosaccharide composition results for beverage, okay? In the hormone, in the axes of this heat map, it's different fractions of these hormone samples. From top to the bottom, it's 3 kD permeate, 3 kD retentate, 10 kD permeate, 10 kD retentate, and then microfiltration retentate permeate, and the starting materials. And if you see the color, the deeper the color is, the higher abundance of this type of monosaccharides could be. What is monosaccharides is on the bottom. See this x-axis, right? So including 14 different type of monosaccharides, ranging from arabinose to xylose. The major dominating one is glucose, okay? The glucose in the deep colors, and followed by the galactose and the arabinose. And the other rest of the 11 monosaccharides exist in the minor amounts. And then compared to the starting material, the fractions of after the membrane filtrations enrich the galactose a lot, not only glucose, but galactose, but arabinose. So enrich actually every carbohydrates. So we can conclude that the polysaccharides exist in high amounts in this beverage. And at least 50% of carbohydrate are in the polysaccharide form. Then come to the soybean milk. The major monosaccharides are glucose and galactose, okay? And they are in a ratio of 2 to 1. And the other 12 monosaccharides are in minor quantities. And there's a good amount of polysaccharides existing in 10 kD fractions, no matter in retentate or permeate. And then for coconut, the result it become more simple. The only dominating one, this green colors, is glucose. And if you compare coconut, right, you see around 200 milligram per grams of glucose in there. And then for the soybean milk is around 200 to, well, 90 to 200 milligram per gram. For a coconut is around 30 to 70 milligram per gram. But let's look into the oat beverage. It's super high. It can go up to 700 milligram per gram of solid materials, which means it's almost 100% of carbohydrates in the oat milk. Okay, very few proteins, very few lipids, and the dominating one is the glucose, no matter in which fractions. And this one, so it's very interesting, and we think about, it's either in the starch form, which is called alpha glucans, or it could be beta glucan, which is very healthy, indigestible, and can be a prebiotic. So what it is, the question will be released later. And we test this beverage on the probiotic streams. Okay, so in the 96 well plates, we dropped the beverage samples together with the microbial mediums and with the probiotic streams. And then you see here, compared to glucose standards, almond, coconut, soybean, oat, all these polysaccharide fractions can very well stimulate the growth of probiotic streams. And this work is thanks to Dr. David Mears, who helped us to conduct. And compared to boiled milk, the growth effects is equally good, right? So you see, at the beginning, the time 0 point, there's a minimum absorbance. And with time going, the absorbance start to grow higher. And these values means the densities of bacteria grows in the wells. Boiled milk is as good as the almond polysaccharides, or conversely, the beverage polysaccharides is as good as boiled milk oligosaccharides. And then, so to answer the question that in the oat milk, right, here, is super highly concentrated with glucose. What are they? And this result tell you that the majority of carbohydrate, more than 50%, are the starch. They are alpha glucans. Okay, no matter in the starting material, in the retentate 10 kD or 10 kD filtrations, or in the 3 kD filtrations. And there's a very minimum beta glucans, around 2 milligram per gram, 2 milligram per milliliter in the beverage. It's very low quantities, and including some other indigestible carbohydrates. So for the starch, we know that, well, it's very easy to be digested and can stimulate the blood sugars after you intake them. So, so the patients with diabetes maybe will pay more attention if you take it. And yes, let's turn into the digestion sections. So we know that if once we know that there are many starch, we want to remove them, right? Go through to mimic the digestion process. Go through the oral phase, gastric phase, and the intestinal phase digestions. And this method we call InfoGest is a very publicly recognized method, and adding to different starch enzymes to digest it, and then separate them into different molecular mass range, including 10 kD retentate and 3 kD retentate. They are polysaccharide fractions. And these fractions stimulate very well all the probiotics, the lactobacillus, planktons. They grow very well on this beverage polysaccharide fraction, even after digestion, right? It's interesting. But the surprising finding is that the enzyme, which is a control group at the last column here, also very well stimulate growth of probiotic streams. What does it mean? It means that this enzyme is also a good carbon source of this lactobacillus planktons. And why? Then we investigate a bit, and then hydrolyze these samples and evaluating using Anselm methods. We found that no matter in 10 kD retentate or 3 kD retentate, it contains a good number of carbohydrates in this enzyme control group. Okay, and then we contact the manufacturer and ask why there's so many carbohydrates in these samples. Well, one cause is that the polysaccharides or oligosaccharides will be added into this enzyme products as a stabilizer or preservatives, okay, to prolong the shelf life during this freezing and thawing cycles, right? Usually, the enzyme activities can last 1 year or more in the fridge. And another case is that we found in literature that the enzyme we use is amylase and amylase glucosidase. They are heavily glycosylated, so they contain a high amount of N-glycans. Well, that's the source of where this carbohydrate comes from, right? Around 5 milligrams per milliliter in the enzyme control group. And then is the end of our presentations. Some take-home message for the glycomics characterizations. Only one analytical techniques is not enough to profile every details of carbohydrates, and the multiple one will need to be utilized. And compared to the 4 beverages, the oligosaccharides fractions is highest in coconut samples. But in the old samples, but the coconut show the highest diversity of structures, and the soybeans always stand in the middle. And then we also characterize and quantify the polysaccharides in 4 beverage samples. In terms of functionalities, the plant-based oligosaccharides or polysaccharides are very suitable, right, to replace the human milk oligosaccharides in the hybrid products. So that's the answer for you. And if there's any alternatives to the infant formulas or to the human milk, hybrid products could be one option. And then the oligosaccharides and polysaccharides show very good probiotics compared to the human milk, to the dairy milk oligosaccharides. But they exist in relatively high abundance, easily to find, more affordable, more accessible. And also we get some unexpected findings. In the oat milk, it's really enriched with starch, right? So again, pay more attention if you have diabetes. And also in the in vitro simulated digestion models, we found that the digestion enzymes contain a very good number of carbohydrates, likely the stabilizer or preservatives, or the native glycosylated branch. So that is confusing our assessment of prebiotic effects, also about the carbohydrate composition or characterizations. And so that's in the future study, if anyone want to work on these areas, pay attention. That's the carbohydrate in the enzyme is going to affect their results. Try to avoid that influence. Thank you very much. And this is the end of my talk, and let's eat more plants. Yeah. Thank you.
And we'll take some questions now.
I'm just going to ask, can you put it back on the previous slide? That's my request. Thank you.
Hi. I enjoyed our conversation at breakfast this morning. Mm-hmm. Great presentation.
Thank you.
Given that the premise for the research is trying to characterize plant-based milks relative to breast milk, and that your presentation began with a comparison of breast milk versus bovine milk, I was expecting to see through your presentation breast milk characterization and bovine milk characterization as framing references for the plant-based research. And I'm curious if that was not in the presentation, because that's well understood, thoroughly researched, and doesn't require new research. And so anyone who's aware of the field would know how to find the bovine breast milk characterizations and compare it to what you're doing in almond milk, or if that is work that still needs to be done, if it's part of your planned research to do that similarity characterization at the high level. And then you're going very deep on the prebiotic activity analysis, which in terms of the interest in microbiome activity and SFA production and all the benefits of the good microbes. Anyway, I was curious about the absence of comparisons to your ideal breast milk, and how the plant-based milks, how well they correlate to that versus do they tend toward the bovine milk, or they're very different. So that lack of that comparison was surprising to me, and I'm wondering if it's well understood and you could touch on it, or if that's an area that still requires further research.
Well, yeah, so at the beginning we mentioned the hybrid products, we mentioned the dairy products, right? And definitely we are stimulate, we increase the audience that where is the data of bovine milk or human milk. In terms of carbohydrates in the bovine milk or human milk, actually the major, actually 99% of carbohydrates are lactose. And the lactose are around 4.5% of percent of overall solid weights in the milk powders, right? And then there's in terms of oligosaccharides in the bovine milk, you can consider as a zero. It's a very, very low, 0.02%. And then for human milk is relatively higher, but not such abundance as a plant-based material. It's around 0.2%, right? 10 times higher, but still very low. And the polysaccharides, there's no polysaccharides in the human, in any dairy products. So answer becomes simple, and hopefully it answers your question. Right. So the structures of bovine milk and the human milk oligosaccharides are relatively close, quite close. There's a more high abundance and there's a high diversity of structures in human milk for sure. Bovine milk is a good representative of that gold standard of human milk oligosaccharides. And in the prebiotic studies, we indeed compare the prebiotic fats between the bovine milk and the plant-based oligosaccharides. And the structures of the bovine milk oligosaccharides are right now very well clarified. Yeah, there's like a dozen of them, around 60. Yeah, but for human milk oligosaccharides, around 200 structures. Like that.
I have a question. Yeah, thank you so much, Han.
Yeah, thank you.
I just have a question that linking back to my colleague asking a question about the infant formula this morning. I work for a company. We develop HMOs, the human milk oligosaccharide. We know those are very important for infant to support the bifidobacteria growth.
Right.
And without those, you will never develop a good immune system. So I know we can develop those using milk base, but is it possible to make them for infant formulas, or at least for kids? Plant-based food for kids below 2 years, where they can benefit from that. Can we generate those fibers using plant-based ingredient, not a milk-related?
Well, answer is yes and no. Let's say the positive side, yes, is that the infants after around 6 months or 3 months, they start to gradually have a more comprehensive probiotic stream or overall gut microbiota diversities in their guts. And then after that, you start to feed them with plant-based materials. It will be very healthy, and it won't usually stimulate any immune or allergies issues or like digestibility issues. But what I so far noticed is that in the early stage of these lactations, the infants really need some structures of human milk oligosaccharides, because certain strains, as I mentioned before, in the soybean milk, actually is the best case of all the plant-based milk. I can show high proteins, high oligosaccharides, diverse structures, but it didn't help certain probiotic strains as far as we can notice, right? So what is that called? Bifidum bacteria bifidum. That strain cannot grow on the soybean milk oligosaccharides, right? So, and only the human milk oligosaccharides can help them, right? So that's the unreplaceable part of the dairy products, and yeah, what can I tell? Hope it. Thank you. Yeah, but very nice question. Thank you. Yeah. That's I think the point is that every parents care about their kids, right?
Yeah, my question pertains to the protein.
Right.
And I've looked at all these milks except coconut milk.
Mm-hmm.
Soybean has the highest amount of protein, very close to the cow milk. Whereas I would have expected almond to be very similar or higher in protein, but it's not, at least from the labels, right? So can you tell me why is that?
Well, coconut it's kind of fruits and the source of I think I don't know its English name, but in translation I probably call it coconut meat, right? It's a powder from them, but in the almond it's really high abundance in oil, lipids, right? In lipids, so the major calorie source of almond beverage is from lipids, not from carbohydrate, not from protein, right? And so, well, if you take almond milk, it can let you stay away from hungry for a long time. But well, in terms of protein intake, I think probably coconut is better, right? Right. And coconut also contains a good number of medium chain fatty acids. It can supply your energy intake very quickly, right? And very healthy, I would say. Yeah. Right.
Hi, thank you for your presentation. That next slide, could you go to it actually? No, the very last one.
Oh, okay.
So I just had a question. The California Dairy Research Foundation, was that part of the funding for this?
Yes.
Okay.
It's a collaborative funding. First of all, this plant-based project is mainly funded by the CDRF.
Okay.
And then we also is supported by the hatch projects of USDA.
Right.
Right. So we want to emphasize them.
Okay.
Yes.
Just for non-scientists, it's really important on the conflict of interest portion. I remember at the beginning of your talk, you said there were no conflicts of interest.
Right.
I would just respectfully ask you to disclose something like this, because again, for non-scientists, we are looking to research papers that come out,
Right.
and if the Plant-Based Food Association is supporting something, I think people should know that. If the Dairy Association is supporting something, people should know that.
Right.
Same with the beef industry. So,
Right.
so that's all. Again, I don't want to be disrespectful,
Right.
but I just want to let you know that's very important to consumers out there.
Right. Right. I think it's a very good point and very sensitive in terms of our sponsor. The CDRF actually is a dairy foundations, right? The plant-based beverage actually. Logically, it has nothing to do with them, but they want to compare because, yeah, right. Right.
In the marketplace, they are very competitive and they are very aggressive about finding research that reinforces the perceived need for bovine milk in nutrition. And so I think the point is important to make, and it seems that often the research community is not sufficiently aware of how critical to the credibility of your research and the consumer perception of the quality, the meaningfulness of the outcomes. How many people are starting to pay attention to who funded the research? Right. And is there a marketplace competition that might have any kind of this? Of course, there's no way to know what happened in the lab, what happened in communications with the sponsors. Anyway.
Yeah.
But I also find it very difficult to get funding for research from the Almond Growers Association because they're not as rich as or as active in research as here. So
Wow.
that's a huge challenge.
Exactly, very good information. So any plant-based foundation, welcome to fund us. Okay, we want to continue this part of research and create a critical information for no matter dairy or plant-based beverage market. Yeah.
All right, any last questions?
Thank you, Dr. Peng, for your presentation. I have just a quick question for the ultrafiltration process. So can you explain how difficult or easy was the ultrafiltration process, and how was the defatting process performed, and was any optimization for the solvents involved in it?
There's no any solvents and there's no added water. So all liquids we had obtained from the commercial beverage that in the box, they pour it down, pour it into the filtration membrane instruments and separate them. And the separation is done in the University of Wisconsin Medicines, but I can maybe give you some brief ideas, because we also have a pilot plans in the UC Davis we conduct by ourselves, right? Just not as efficient as what they can achieve. I think, can you repeat the second question?
So, I mean, was any optimization involved for checking different solvents for the filtration, before the filtration process?
Okay, yeah, there's only one solvent used, it's water, and there is original water, liquid water in the beverage. Yeah, so optimization is done with of course, the water control, right? And then the beverage will be, separations are very repeated, have been repeated several times, and the one that with more reproducible results was reserved for this presentation.
And you used the same protocol for soy, oat,
exactly.
all samples?
Exactly,
okay.
Exactly. I know it's difficult. Sometimes, especially for oat, it's very easy to clog the membrane, right? So every time we need to change a new membrane instead of repeating use them, it's not the most efficient way, but in the industry, I think they have better solutions. And the optimizations in terms of our lab scales, it could be helpful, but it won't be super helpful. But because no matter when we turn our technology into industries, everything changes. Okay, into a larger scale, when we scale it up, everything changes. They need to use their own parameters. They using their own instruments. So even technicians, we cannot duplicate. So they have to, really investigate and optimize all the works that we have done here. And if anybody is interested, we definitely are happy to provide any information and help you to reproduce our study.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Dr. Han. We'll give him a round of applause.
I just have a couple of announcements before we break for our 30-minute sweet break out there in the lobby there. There are two pieces of paper that are on your table. One is a list of suppliers that if you have them sign off, you can turn this in for a prize. So we would like you to do that today also. And then also there's some evaluations. You just take your camera and you put it over the number that you've seen, and it will actually come up on your phone. Push that, and please take the evaluations so that we can make this a really positive experience again next year. Thank you so much.
All right, we'll come back at 11.